Legacy of Power. 6 months ago. The elevator stopped with a soft ding, and Sofia took a deep breath before taking her first step outside. Andrea, the executive assistant, greeted her with a warm smile. "Miss Mendes, Mr. Torres is waiting. Please follow me." The office was even more impressive than the rumors suggested. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of São Paulo, and the minimalist decor in shades of gray and black exuded power. Lucas Torres stood by the window, hands in the pockets of his impeccably tailored Italian suit, gazing out at the city below. Photos in magazines did not do justice to his presence. At 35, he had that kind of masculine beauty that improved with age. A well-defined jawline, penetrating green eyes, and black hair with a few gray strands at the temples that only enhanced his charm. Masculine fragrance momentarily distracted her. She cleared her throat and began her presentation, determined to maintain professionalism. As you can see in the graphs, there is a significant inefficiency in our current investment structure in Latin America. My proposal is a complete overhaul. But there was something more in his gaze, a curiosity that went beyond the professional. The presentation was nearing its end when the office door swung open abruptly. An elegant woman in a red dress entered unannounced. Meeting. Andrea should have informed you. Discussion. Valentina paled, her red lips tightening in displeasure. "But Lucas," said softly, "your presentation is fascinating, and I want to hear more about your ideas for the regional restructuring." Sofia nodded, trying to ignore the heat radiating from his body so close to hers. As she resumed her presentation, she couldn't help but notice how his eyes seemed to study every detail of her face, as if he were seeing something far beyond the numbers and graphs in front of her. That would change her life forever, plunging her into a world of power, passion, and dangerous secrets that the Torres family had kept for generations. In the days following the presentation, Sofia immersed herself in her work, trying to ignore the curious glances and whispers from her colleagues. The news of the confrontation with Valentina Rothschild had spread quickly through the company corridors, fueling office gossip. Marina, her best friend and colleague in the finance department, as they had lunch at a cafe near the office. "They say she and Lucas are practically engaged." Notification. It was an email from Andrea, Lucas's assistant. "Mr. Torres requests your presence in his office today at 3 p.m. to discuss your proposal." Sofia's heart raced. Prepare. At 2:55 p.m., Sofia was back in the elevator, heading up to the penthouse. This time she wore a navy blue sheath dress that elegantly highlighted her curves while still looking professional. She had spent the previous hour reviewing her numbers, determined to keep her focus strictly professional. Andrea greeted her with a smile that was different from usual, almost conspiratorial. "Come in, Miss Mendes. Mr. Torres is waiting." When Sofia entered the office, she found Lucas standing. Next to his desk, the top buttons of his shirt undone and his sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept all night. "Sofia," he said, using her first name for the first time. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." She settled into one of the chairs in front of his desk, trying to ignore how her name sounded different on his lips. "I read your complete proposal," Lucas began, sitting on the edge of his desk, too close for Sofia's comfort. "It's brilliant. Exactly the kind of change we need to implement." "Thank you, Mr. Torres," Sofia replied, maintaining a professional tone. "Lucas," he gently corrected her, "I think after you essentially replan our entire strategy in Latin America, we can use first names." Sofia felt her cheeks warm. "Lucas," she conceded, and saw something darken in his eyes when she said his name. "Actually," he continued, his voice lower, "I would like to discuss your proposal in more detail. How about a working dinner tonight?" Sofia froze. A dinner? With Lucas Torres? Her mind immediately went to magazine headlines showing Lucas and Valentina at exclusive restaurants. "I don't know if that would be appropriate," she replied hesitantly. Lucas leaned slightly forward. "It's just a business dinner, Sofia, to discuss how we can implement your ideas in the best way possible." Before she could respond, the office door opened again. This time, it was an older man with gray hair and a pristine suit. "Lucas, we need to talk," he said gravely, barely acknowledging Sofia's presence. "Ricardo," Lucas replied, his posture changing immediately. "I'm in a meeting." "It's about your father," Ricardo insisted, and Sofia noticed Lucas pale slightly. "And the latest findings from the investigation." The air in the office grew heavy. Sofia quickly stood up, feeling like she was witnessing something she shouldn't. "Excuse me, I was just leaving," she said, beginning to back away. "Sofia," Lucas called. "Her," his voice tense. "About the dinner." She turned at the door, meeting his intense gaze. "At 8 p.m., she heard herself say, surprised by her own boldness. "Send me the address." As she returned to her desk, Sofia couldn't stop thinking about Lucas's expression when Ricardo mentioned his father. There was something more to that story, something dark behind the Torres family's facade of success and power. And now, somehow, she felt she was being pulled into the middle of this mystery. Marais. Alta was exactly the kind of restaurant Sofia imagined Lucas Torres would frequent. Located on the top floor of one of São Paulo's most exclusive buildings, it offered a stunning view of the city through its glass walls. When she arrived, precisely at 8 p.m., the maitre d' immediately led her to a private table partially hidden by elegant screens. Lucas was already there, now wearing a navy suit that seemed tailor-made for him. He stood up as she approached, his eyes appreciatively scanning the black dress she had hurried to buy after work. "You look stunning," he said simply, pulling out a chair for her. "Thank you," Sofia replied, trying to ignore the tremor in her hands as she sat down. "The place is incredible." "I hope you like seafood," Lucas commented as the sommelier approached with a bottle of white wine. "The chef here makes the best octopus in the city." The conversation flowed naturally as they enjoyed the appetizer, a delicate octopus salad with fresh herbs. Lucas was surprisingly easy to talk to, demonstrating a deep knowledge not only of business but also of art, literature, and classical music. "So," he said after a sip of wine, "how has such a brilliant analyst not been snatched up by one of our competitors?" Sofia smiled. "Maybe I'm loyal to the company. Or maybe," Lucas leaned slightly forward, "you have other reasons to stay." His gaze was intense, making Sofia's heart race. Before she could respond, her phone vibrated in her bag. It was a message from Marina. "Urgent! Look up the news on Valentina Rothschild now." Frowning, Sofia quickly opened a news website. The headline made her blood run cold. "Socialite Valentina Rothschild hospitalized after mysterious accident in her penthouse." "Is there a problem?" Lucas asked, noticing her expression. Sofia hesitated for a moment before showing him the news. His reaction was almost imperceptible. A slight stiffening of his shoulders, a shadow passing over his eyes. "How tragic," he commented, his voice neutral. "I hope she recovers." Something in the way he said that made Sofia remember the conversation she had witnessed earlier about the investigation into his father's death. An uneasy feeling began to grow in her stomach. Fell from the second-floor balcony. "I'm sorry," Sofia said softly. "I shouldn't have asked." Lucas shook his head. "No, it's fine. It's natural to be curious." He paused, fiddling with his wine glass. "Especially considering the rumors." "What rumors?" "That it wasn't an accident." His eyes met hers. That someone wanted control of the company. The air between them grew thick with tension. Sofia felt a shiver run down her spine. "And you?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "What do you think?" Lucas leaned in closer, his scent enveloping Sofia like a seductive cloud. "I think there are things too dangerous to know in this family." At that moment, his phone rang. Seeing the number, his expression changed. "I need to take this. Excuse me." He stepped back a few paces, speaking in a low voice. Sofia watched him, noting how his posture grew increasingly tense as the conversation went on. When he returned, his face was grim. It was Ricardo. "There's been a development in the investigation. I need to go." "Of course," Sofia replied, trying to hide her disappointment. "I completely understand." Lucas hesitated for a moment, then pulled a card from his pocket and wrote something on the back. "My personal number," he explained, handing it to her. "Please call me if you need anything." "And Sofia," he paused significantly. "Be careful." As she watched him leave in a hurry, Sofia twirled the card between her fingers, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. His warning felt laden with hidden meanings. First, her father, now Valentina. A pattern was forming, and the more she thought about it, the more frightening it seemed. Her phone vibrated again. It was another message from Marina. "Sofia, you won't believe it. They just found compromising documents in Valentina's apartment. Something related to the Torres." Sofia barely slept that night. Lucas's words echoed in her mind. There are things too dangerous to know in this family. After hours of tossing in bed, she finally fell asleep, only to be awakened by the insistent ringing of her phone at 6 a.m. "Sofia?" Marina's voice was tense. "Turn on the TV now. News channel." Still groggy, Sofia reached for the remote. The morning news anchor was serious. Repeating urgent news. Documents found in Valentina Rothschild's apartment suggest a money laundering scheme involving Torres and Azevedo Investments. The socialite remains hospitalized in serious condition after what police now suspect to be an attempted murder. Sleep left Sofia instantly. Her hands trembled as she turned up the volume. Among the documents, the reporter continued, evidence was found that may be related to the death of Roberto Torres, father of the current CEO Lucas Torres, which occurred 6 months ago. The doorbell rang, making Sofia jump. It was 6:15 a.m. Who could it be? She cautiously approached the door and peeked through the peephole. Her heart nearly stopped. There were 2 men in suits, one of them holding a police badge. "Miss Sofia Mendes?" called one. "Of them. Federal police. We need to ask you a few questions." Sofia took a deep breath, trying to control her panic. She opened the door slowly. "How can I help?" "I'm Delegate Ramirez," said the older one, showing his identification. "We'd like to talk about your dinner with Lucas Torres last night." The other officer scanned the apartment over her shoulder. "Can we come in?" Sofia stepped aside, her mind working frantically. How did they already know about the dinner? "Miss Mendes," Ramirez began. "Sitting on the sofa without invitation, we're investigating a series of irregularities at Torres and Azevedo. Your recent closeness to Lucas Torres interests us." "It was just a work dinner," Sofia replied, keeping her voice steady, "to discuss my regional restructuring proposal." "Interesting." Ramirez smiled without humor. "And during that work dinner, did Mr. Torres mention anything about compromising documents? About your father, perhaps?" Sofia felt a chill. "No, we talked only about business." The other officer, who had been examining the photos on the shelf, turned around. "Are you sure? Because we have witnesses who heard quite a different conversation." Sofia's phone vibrated on the table. It was a message from Lucas. "Don't trust anyone who says they're from the police. I'm sending someone to get you. 5 minutes." Her heart raced, but she maintained a neutral expression. "As I said, it was strictly a professional dinner." Ramirez leaned forward. "Miss Mendes, I'll be direct. We have evidence that Valentina Rothschild discovered something big, something that cost her safety. If you know anything..." The doorbell rang again. Sofia almost sighed in relief. "Excuse me," she said, standing up to answer. It was Ricardo, the man who interrupted her meeting with Lucas the day before. "Miss Mendes," he said formally, "I presume these gentlemen haven't presented a warrant." The supposed police officers exchanged glances. Ramirez stood up slowly. "We don't need a warrant to ask questions," he said, his voice now tinged with threat. "But you do need real identifications," Ricardo replied calmly, "because I just spoke with the real Delegate Ramirez. He's in Brasilia." The silence that followed was deafening. In a swift motion, the fake Ramirez drew a gun. Imposters assessed the situation for a second before lowering their weapons. "This isn't over," the fake Ramirez warned before passing by them and disappearing down the corridor with his accomplice. Sofia felt her legs weaken. Lucas reached her before she could fall. his strong arms wrapping around her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice tense with concern. "Who were they?" Sofia whispered, still trembling. "What's happening?" Lucas exchanged a meaningful glance with Ricardo. "That's exactly what we need to find out. And now that they know you're involved, you're no longer safe here." "Involved?" Sofia stepped back to look into his eyes. "Involved in what?" "In a conspiracy," Ricardo replied gravely. "That started with the death of Roberto Torres, and now threatens to destroy everything the family has built." Lucas held Sofia's face in his hands. "I know it's asking a lot, but I need you to trust me. Come with me now. I promise to explain everything, but first we need to ensure your safety." Sofia looked at her apartment, at the normal life she had just a few days ago, and then back at Lucas. In his eyes, beyond the worry, there was something more, a silent promise of protection, but also of danger and adventure. "Let me change clothes," she finally said, "and grab some things." As she headed to the bedroom, her phone vibrated once more. It was Marina. "Sofia, you need to see this. They just leaked old emails from Roberto Torres. Your name is in them. From 3 years ago." Sofia stared at Marina's message in disbelief. Her name in old emails from Roberto Torres? That didn't make sense. She had only started working at the company 2 years ago. With trembling hands, she threw some clothes into a suitcase while trying to call her friend, but the call went straight to voicemail. 15 minutes later, she was in the back seat of an armored SUV, sitting between Lucas and Ricardo. The 2 security guards occupied the front seats, skillfully navigating the morning traffic. "Where are we going?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "To a safe place," Lucas replied, his fingers lightly brushing against hers on the seat. "A family property that few know about." "Lucas," Sofia took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Marina just texted me. She said they leaked your father's emails, and that my name is in them. From 3 years ago." Lucas's body tensed beside her. Ricardo leaned forward, suddenly interested. "Impossible," Lucas murmured. "You don't—" "Sir," the driver interrupted him. "I think we're being followed." Sofia looked through the rear window. 2 identical black cars were maintaining a constant distance. "Carlos," Lucas ordered the driver. "Evasive Protocol 3. What followed was a series of maneuvers that Sofia had only seen in action movies. The SUV weaved through traffic, making sharp turns and sudden changes in direction. At one particularly tense moment, Sofia was thrown against Lucas, who protectively wrapped an arm around her. "We lost one of them," Carlos reported, "but the other is persistent." "The underground passage," Ricardo suggested. "We can lose them there." Lucas nodded, and Carlos steered the vehicle toward an entrance Sofia had never noticed before, even after passing that street hundreds of times. It was a discreet ramp leading to a dimly lit tunnel. "Where are we?" she whispered. "Old passages built during the dictatorship," Lucas explained. "My father mapped them all." The Iun tunnel branched off in several directions, and Carlos navigated them as if he knew the way by heart. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they emerged in a quiet residential area that Sofia didn't recognize. "We made it," Carlos announced, but his voice was still tense. Lucas finally relaxed his protective embrace but didn't pull away completely. "Sofia," he said gently, "I need you to see something." He pulled a tablet from the side compartment of the car and, after a few commands, showed her an email dated 3 years ago. From Roberto Torres. To Board of Directors. Subject: Project Phoenix, confidential. The asset is secure. The girl has no idea of her importance. Keep Sofia Mendes under surveillance, but do not interfere. When the time comes, she will be crucial to our survival. Sofia felt the blood run cold in her veins. I don't understand. I never knew your father." "No?" Ricardo asked, his voice heavy with meaning. "Are you sure?" Images began to flash in Sofia's mind. A car accident 15 years ago. Her parents, the hospital, a suited man visiting her while she recovered. "The man from the hospital," she murmured, long-buried memories surfacing. He paid for my treatment." Said he was a family friend. Lucas held her hand tighter. That was my father. But why? What did you mean to him? Before anyone could answer, the car came to a smooth stop in front of an old house hidden behind high walls covered in ivy. We've arrived, Carlos announced. As Sofia gazed at the imposing mansion, her phone vibrated once more. It was an unknown number with a single message. Dear Sofia, after so many years, we will finally meet again. Your mother would be so proud. Or, should I say, our mother? Sofia felt the world spin around her. The last thing she saw before everything went dark were Lucas's worried eyes and Ricardo's pale face, who had read the message over her shoulder. The soft light of the sunset streaming through tall windows. For a moment, she felt disoriented until the memories of the recent events hit her like a wave. The fake police officers, the chase, Roberto Torres's email, and that last disturbing message. Our mother, she murmured, sitting up abruptly. Easy, Lucas' deep voice sounded nearby. He was sitting in an armchair next to the bed, his jacket discarded and his tie loose. He looked exhausted, but hadn't left her side. You passed out a few hours ago. Sofia ran her fingers through her hair, trying to organize her thoughts. That message. Closed her eyes, painful memories surfacing. It was raining. We were coming back from a family dinner. A truck lost control. Her voice faltered. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital. Alone. Lucas moved closer, sitting on the edge of the bed. His proximity sent shivers down Sofia's skin. Not completely alone, he gently corrected. My father was there. Every day. From the inner pocket of his shirt. We found this in his private safe after his death. It was meant to be delivered to you when you turned 30, but he extended the envelope. I think you need to read it now. Mother. It was an intense but forbidden love. My family had already arranged my marriage to the heiress of the Azevedo family, a union that would solidify the financial empire we built. Helena stepped away when she learned of the pregnancy, choosing to raise you with Antonio, a good man who truly loved her. I respected her decision but never stopped watching over you from a distance. The accident. It wasn't an accident. There were people after the secrets your mother kept. Secrets about our family, about the true power behind the Torres. Antonio discovered something he shouldn't have, and think about was how Lucas's hand on hers triggered sensations that were anything but brotherly. No, she said, pulling her hand away. This is impossible. His first daughter, you, Sofia. They're not alone. Valentina Rothschild is with them. Fingers intertwined with his. There was no hesitation, only the electrifying certainty that, siblings or not, her fate was irrevocably tied to Lucas Torres. To lead to the basement. Them. But, sir, something is wrong with her. She's different. Mad, he murmured. No, Ricardo interjected, his face pale in the dim light. She remembers. Realized they were in another set of tunnels, similar to the one they had used earlier. Lucas, she called softly as they ran. That message I received, about our mother. Head spin. There she is. Valentina's voice sounded closer. The precious heir, the favorite daughter. The engine running. Get in, he shouted. More important, she is the key to everything. He turned, drawing a weapon. Go, I'll hold them off. Lifted her face to look at him, their lips dangerously close. Nothing is fine, she whispered. How can it be? You're my brother, but then he was letting on. Arrived, night had already fallen, enveloping the property in deep shadows. Carlos did a thorough scan of the perimeter while Lucas guided Sofia inside. No one knows this place, he explained, turning on the lights in the office. It was my mother's secret refuge. Your stepmother's. His hands through his hair in frustration. Ricardo didn't say what the password was. Part, and Lucas instinctively covered her hand with his over the mouse. The touch, even innocent, sent sparks of electricity between them. What photo? He asked, his voice rougher than usual. But her voice died as her eyes met his. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made them pull apart abruptly. It was just Carlos, returning from his rounds. Means I failed to protect all of you. Sofia, Lucas, and yes, Valentina. Of a bigger plan, a plan that the video was interrupted by interference. When it returned, Roberto seemed even more agitated. "There's no time. They're coming. Sofia, you're not my only daughter. And Lucas isn't my—" The recording ended abruptly. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Lucas was pale, his hands trembling over the keyboard. "No," he whispered. "This can't be true." Sofia felt her world spin. So when Valentina said, "About being a sister," but who? Lucas couldn't finish the sentence. The laptop beeped, another folder opening on its own. It was a DNA file, dated a week before Roberto's death. The images showed 3 different paternity tests. "My God," Carlos murmured, moving closer for a better look. "This means—" A noise from outside the house interrupted him. Headlights illuminated the office windows. "Impossible," Lucas growled, closing the laptop. "No one knows this place." "Your mother knew." A familiar voice sounded from the door. "And she told me everything before she died." The 3 turned. Valentina was standing in the entrance, but there was something different about her. Her eyes, usually brown, now shone in a green hue identical to Lucas's. "Hello, little brother." She smiled, but there was no warmth in her expression. Or should I say, cousin. Before anyone could react, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the house. Gas canisters began releasing a thick smoke into the air. Lucas grabbed the laptop with one hand and Sofia with the other. "Carlos," he shouted through the spreading smoke. "Back exit." The security guard's voice responded somewhere to the right. Now. As they ran through the house that was quickly filling with smoke, Sofia realized that each answer they found only generated more questions. And now, with the possibility of Lucas not being her brother, her feelings for him were becoming even more confusing and intense. Valentina's laughter echoed behind them, mixed with the sound of footsteps and screams. "You can run," she hummed, "but the truth always catches up. And the truth, dear ones, is much darker than you imagine." The gas burned in Sofia's eyes as Lucas pulled her through the corridors of the cottage. Carlos had disappeared into the smoke ahead of them, and the sounds of pursuit seemed to come from all directions. "This way," Lucas whispered, guiding her toward what looked like a wine cellar. Rows of wine bottles glimmered faintly in the dim light. He moved purposefully to one of the shelves and pulled a specific bottle. A soft click preceded the movement of the entire shelf, revealing yet another secret passage. "How many tunnels does your family have?" Sofia asked, half hysterical, as he pulled her inside. "They're not my family's tunnels," Lucas replied bitterly as he closed the passage behind them. "Apparently, I don't know who my family is anymore." The passage was narrow, forcing them to walk very close together. Sofia could feel the heat of his body, hear his heavy breathing, and that closeness was making it hard to think clearly. "Lucas," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "what Ricardo said about 3 babies, and that DNA test—" "Not now," he interrupted her, his voice tense. "First, we need to—" A metallic sound echoed through the tunnel, followed by a familiar laugh. "How lovely," Valentina's voice sounded through some old sound system. "The lovebirds running away together. But do you really think you can escape the truth? That you can run away from who you really are?" Lucas cursed softly, quickening his pace. The tunnel began to slope steeply downward. "You know," Valentina's voice continued, echoing off the stone walls, "Mom always said I was special, that I had been chosen, but she never told me for what, until her deathbed." Sofia stumbled, and Lucas caught her by the waist, holding her firmly against his body. For a moment they stood there, frozen, their hearts racing in a frantic rhythm that had nothing to do with running. "Clara. Azevedo wasn't a foolish woman," Valentina went on. "She knew Roberto was cheating on her, knew about Helena, and about the nurse Marina. So she did what any determined woman would do, took control of the situation." Lucas tensed beside Sofia. "What is she talking about?" "3 babies," Valentina laughed, the sound reverberating off the walls. "3 women. A brilliant plan to ensure the Torres empire remained under the right control. The question is, who is the child of whom? Sofia felt Lucas shudder. Her hand found his in the darkness, intertwining their fingers without thinking. "The DNA test on the laptop," she whispered. "We need to see it." Lucas nodded, but before they could do anything, an explosion shook the tunnel. Rocks began to fall from the ceiling. "No!" Lucas shouted, pushing Sofia forward as the tunnel began to collapse behind them. They ran desperately through the darkness, the sound of destruction chasing them. Sofia could feel the dust in her lungs, the terror growing in her chest. Finally, they emerged into a natural cave, faintly lit by old emergency lamps. The sound of collapse stopped, but now they were isolated. The tunnel they had come through completely blocked by debris. "Lucas!" Sofia called in panic, coughing through the dust. "Carried. We need to see that test," she said softly. Lucas reluctantly released her and pulled the laptop from the backpack. The screen illuminated their faces in the dim light as he opened the file. "My God!" Sofia gasped as she read the results. The test showed 3 DNA comparisons. Sample A, Sofia Mendes, compatible with Helena Mendes, he, mother, and Roberto Torres. Emma, father. Sample B, Valentina Rothschild, compatible with Marina Rothschild, mother, and Roberto Torres. And father, Sample C, Lucas Torres. No compatibility with Roberto Torres. Paternal compatibility with... Lucas's father's name was corrupted in the file, but there was a handwritten note from Roberto. He needs to know the truth about Ricardo. "Ricardo," Sofia whispered. But that would mean... A sound of clapping echoed through the cave. "Bravo," a familiar voice said from the shadows. "Finally, you're piecing it together." Ricardo emerged from the darkness, showing no sign of the injury he was supposed to have sustained hours earlier. His eyes shone with a disturbing intensity. "Father?" Lucas asked, his voice thick with emotion and disbelief. "Hello, son." Ricardo smiled, but there was something predatory in his expression. "I think we have a lot to talk about, don't we? About family, loyalty, and the true purpose of Project Phoenix." The air in the cave grew heavy with tension. Lucas instinctively positioned himself in front of Sofia, one hand still holding the laptop, the other blindly searching for hers. "You faked." "Being shot," Sofia accused Ricardo. "Why? Sometimes we need to stage a little theater to bring people exactly where we want them," Ricardo replied, casually walking around the cave. "This cave, for example. Did you know this is where it all began? The true Torres Empire." "What are you talking about?" Lucas demanded, his voice trembling slightly. Ricardo stopped near one of the rocky walls, running his fingers over ancient inscriptions that Sofia had not noticed before. In 1895, 3 families, Torres, Azevedo, and Rothschild, discovered something here, something that would forever change their fate. He turned to face them. "Have you ever wondered how a family of immigrants managed to build a financial empire so quickly?" Sofia felt a shiver run down her spine. The inscriptions on the wall seemed to pulse under the dim light, ancient symbols telling a long-forgotten story. "Project Phoenix," Ricardo continued, "didn't start with Roberto. It started here, with a discovery and a blood pact. Among the 3 families, each generation would need 3 guardians, 1 from each lineage. The 3 babies," Sofia whispered. "Exactly." Ricardo smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Roberto broke the pact when he fell in love with Helena. The birth of 2 Torres blood daughters in the same cycle. He shook his head. The balance was disturbed. "So you killed him," Lucas said, the revelation hitting him like a punch. "Your own brother." Sofia gasped. Brothers? Ricardo was Roberto's brother. Roberto was weak. Ricardo spat the words. He let love cloud his judgment. The empire we built could not be threatened by sentimentality. He pulled something from his pocket, an old medallion with the same symbol engraved on the wall. That's why Clara did what needed to be done that night in the hospital. She switched the babies, ensuring that each family had its guardian. You, Lucas, were the perfect baby to be raised as a Torres. Strong, determined, like me. No, Lucas shook his head. You're lying. Am I? Ricardo raised an eyebrow. Then why do you think you always trusted me so much? Why did you always feel this connection? Sofia watched the pain on Lucas's face, her heart aching. She squeezed his hand tighter, trying to convey strength. And what about Valentina? She asked, trying to buy time as her mind raced. Ah, Valentina, Ricardo sighed. The nurse's daughter who fell in love with Roberto. She was supposed to be just a piece on the board, but Clara didn't count on the Torres. Genes being so dominant. A sound of metal scraping caught everyone's attention. On the other side of the cave, a secret door opened, revealing Valentina. She was no longer hysterical. Instead, she emanated a disturbing calm. Finally, she said, approaching. The family is reunited. You knew, Sofia accused. All this time. No, Valentina replied. I only found out when I woke up in the hospital after the accident. Something in the fall unlocked memories. Memories of Clara telling me. Everything before she died. Ricardo nodded in approval. Trauma sometimes has that effect, especially with the modifications we made to you when you were babies. Modifications? Lucas asked, his voice faltering. Ricardo raised the medallion, which began to emit a strange glow. On the wall, the ancient symbols responded, lighting up in a hypnotic sequence. What we discovered in this cave, he said softly, was not gold or diamonds. It was something much more valuable, something that allowed us to enhance the lineage. Sofia felt a wave of dizziness as the symbols pulsed. Beside her, Lucas swayed slightly. Ah, yes, Ricardo smiled. You can feel it, can't you? The call of blood, the modifications awakening. Stop, Lucas pleaded, dropping to his knees. Sofia followed suit, still holding his hand. I can't, Ricardo replied. The ritual has already begun. It's time for the true guardians to take their place. The symbols on the wall now shone brightly, and Sofia felt something awaken inside her, an ancient and terrifying power. Something beyond contained passion. The moment their lips touched, the symbols on the wall exploded into light, and a wave of invisible energy swept through the cave like a supernatural storm. No! Ricardo shouted, but his voice seemed distant, muffled by the roar of power emanating from the couple. Sofia felt her whole body vibrating with an ancient and wild force. Through the kiss, she could feel the same energy pulsing in Lucas, their essences intertwining in a way that transcended the physical. Impossible, Valentina whispered, stepping back. The ritual. It shouldn't be like this. When Sofia and Lucas finally broke apart, their eyes sparkled with a light that overshadowed even the supernatural brilliance of the symbols. But there was something different. While Valentina's eyes glowed with a uniform emerald hue, theirs shimmered with colors that blended and danced like the northern lights. What is happening? Sofia asked, her voice echoing strangely, as if other voices spoke. Alongside hers, ancient, powerful voices. The true Phoenix Project, a new voice replied from the cave entrance. Carlos emerged from the shadows, but he was no longer the discreet security guard they knew. There was an aura of ancestral power around him, and in his hands he held an ancient book that seemed to pulse with its own light. You, Ricardo growled. How dare you interfere? I did not interfere, Carlos replied calmly. I merely observed and protected, as my family has done for generations. We are the guardians of the guardians, and you, Ricardo, have broken all sacred vows. The vows? Lucas asked, still holding Sofia close, both trembling with the energy coursing through their veins. The original pact, Carlos explained, opening the book, was not about power or money. It was about balance. 3 families, 3 guardians, united to protect something far more precious than gold. The love, Sofia whispered, the truth revealing itself in her mind like awakened ancestral memories. The pact was about protecting love. Exactly, Carlos smiled. The power found in this cave over a century ago was not given to create a financial empire. It was a gift to protect true human feelings in a world that was becoming increasingly cold and calculating. Ricardo laughed bitterly. Love? All this power wasted to protect something so trivial? Trivial? Carlos glared at him fiercely. The love between Roberto and Helena was so powerful it birthed Sofia, a natural guardian. Clara's maternal love led her to sacrifice everything to protect Lucas, even if it meant giving him to another family. And Marina's unrequited love for Roberto created Valentina, a guardian of balance. Valentina staggered as if struck. Memories flooded her mind. Her mother crying alone at night, keeping newspaper clippings about Roberto, dying with a smile knowing her daughter would finally discover the truth. But you, Carlos continued, staring at Ricardo, you corrupted everything. You used the gift for power and greed. You manipulated the families, orchestrated deaths, all to maintain your control over an empire that should never have existed. The symbols on the wall began to move, sliding across the rock like serpents of light, converging towards Sofia and Lucas. Your kiss, Carlos explained, was not just an act of forbidden love. It was the key to awakening the true power of the Guardians, a power that cannot be controlled by greed or manipulation. No, Ricardo lunged, the medallion in his hand glowing. Threateningly, I will not allow you to destroy everything I have built. But before he could do anything, Valentina grabbed his arm. Her bright green eyes were misty. Enough, Uncle Ricardo, she said softly. Mom died protecting this secret, and now I understand why. The medallion slipped from Ricardo's hands, floating in the air between them. The light emanating from it was no longer threatening, but gentle and welcoming. The true Guardians have awakened, Carlos declared. And now, a deafening explosion interrupted his words. The cave's ceiling began to collapse, and through the dust and debris, dark silhouettes emerged, armed and threatening. How touching, a familiar voice echoed. But did you really think Ricardo was working alone? Clara Azevedo, who everyone believed had been dead for years, elegantly descended through the rubble, her eyes shining with the same supernatural hue as Valentina's. Mom? Lucas whispered, incredulous. Sofia felt the power within her pulse in alarm. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The energy emanating from Clara was different, corrupted. Oh, dear, Clara smiled, but there was something predatory in her expression. You have no idea what is coming. Clara Azevedo descended the last steps of the rubble with the same elegance that characterized her in social circles years ago. Her hair, once blonde, now displayed silver streaks that seemed to reflect the cave's supernatural light. You should be dead, Ricardo murmured, for the first time looking, genuinely scared. Just as you should have kept your word, little brother, Clara replied, her smile sharp as a blade. But here we are. All the players finally gathered. Sofia felt Lucas shiver beside her. The power flowing between them through their touch was agitated, responding to Clara's corrupted presence. The Azevedo family would be so simplistic? Valentina stepped forward, her bright green eyes fixed on Clara. It was you. You who planted the memories in my mind when I fell. Perspicacious, dear, Clara smiled. You have always been the smartest of the three. Too bad you also inherited your mother's weakness, that desperate desire for love. Carlos pressed the ancient book against his chest, his eyes wide in understanding. The original ritual, you corrupted it. Corrupted is such an ugly word. Clara waved her hand dismissively. I perfected it. Why use so much power merely to protect feelings? The true potential of the Guardians goes far beyond. She curled her lips in disgust. Love. More figures descended through the rubble, men and women with the same bright, supernatural eyes. Other Guardians, Sofia gasped. You created more. I created something better, Clara corrected. Guardians free from the shackles of human emotions, pure in their power. Lucas stepped forward, placing himself between his adoptive mother and Sofia. Why? Why do all this? Clara's smile softened as she looked at him, but her eyes remained cold. "Because it is your destiny, my son. Your true destiny. Not this farce of a protector of love. The power that runs in your veins was made for something greater." "You are wrong," Sofia declared, her voice heavy with the ancestral power pulsing through her. "Love is not weakness. It is the source of true power." As if to prove her point, the energy between her and Lucas intensified, creating a golden aura that enveloped them. The symbols on the walls responded, their glow increasing until it outshone the corrupted lights of Clara's followers. "Beautiful," Clara commented, almost bored, but useless. She raised her hand, and all her followers stepped forward in a disturbing synchrony. "Now, let us show you what true power can do." What happened next was like an explosion of light and energy. Clara's corrupted power collided with Sofia, and Lucas's protective aura, creating a shockwave that shook the entire cavern. Valentina screamed something, her own power resonating with the conflict. Ricardo tried to escape, but he was caught in the crossfire. Carlos began to recite ancient words from the book, his voice almost lost in the chaos. Amidst the supernatural storm, Sofia felt Lucas squeeze her hand. When their gazes met, they were no longer just Sofia and Lucas. They were generations of guardians, the power of true love, accumulated through the centuries. "Together," he asked, his voice echoing with the power of the ancestors. "Together," she replied. Their powers merged in an explosion of golden light that even overshadowed Clara's corrupted glow. For a moment, everything turned white, and then darkness. "Are safe," a soft voice said. It was an elderly woman Sofia had never seen, but something in her eyes felt strangely familiar. Where am I? Where is Lucas?" The woman smiled gently. "Everything will be explained in due time. But first, there is something you need to see." She handed over a newspaper. The headline made Sofia's heart stop. "Empire Torres in Chaos. CEO Lucas Torres and financial analyst Sofia Mendes missing after mysterious explosion. Torres Azevedo, former matriarch of the family, reappears after being presumed dead for years. Valentina Rothschild hospitalized in critical condition. Authorities suspect an international conspiracy involving ancient secret societies." "What happened in that cave?" Sofia whispered. "The true battle," the woman replied enigmatically, "is just beginning. Plans. Share your thoughts in the comments.